Well, Houston is reeling today after being hit hard with a record rainfall amount and flooding caused by Tropical Depression Imelda. Some counties have suffered more than 40 inches of rain over just a 3-day window, with downtown Houston recording its wettest September day in history yesterday. Officials in Houston natives were comparing the devastation with 2017 Category 4 storm Hurricane Harvey, which caused about $125 billion worth of damage as the second most costly storm to hit the mainland U.S. in history. Joining us now is a Houston native who knows the area well as a self-made billionaire and owner of the NBA's Houston Rockets, Tilman Fertitta. Tilman, thank you so much for being here. After Harvey, I know you personally donated money to the disaster relief fund there. Curious to hear what you're hearing on the ground back in Houston.
You know, it's really funny because it seems like every time I'm in New York, which is a lot, it's always raining.
Yeah.
And so to be here in this gorgeous weather and being on my boat in Chelsea Pier and then looking back in Houston, I mean, it's unbelievable again. I mean, you lose the whole few days of business. I had restaurants flooded, you know, all of them closed, school districts. And this is our third storm, tropical depression named storm this quarter. We had one at the beginning of July, then a few weeks ago, and now this one. It's I don't know what it is with Houston and rains in the last 10 years, but we definitely have an issue down there.
Yeah, it seems
we are constantly flooding.
It seems like a theme.
Days for the waters to recede too. So I mean, even though the rain may have stopped,
it's amazing, and it shuts down I-10. You know, which you got to remember, that's what takes you from Florida to California. I have a big casino in Lake Charles that everybody from Houston goes to for the weekend.
Yeah.
And it just is basically gone for the weekend because you can't even get down I-10.
It's a big business impact, but it's not just Houston that you're seeing a lot of this in. I know you spend your time all across the country since you deal with a lot of businesses out there. We just want to highlight a few of them too, and we look across the U.S. and the businesses and restaurants that you have in your portfolio. Among them, Mastro's, Bubba Gump Shrimp Company, Joe's Crab Shack, the Golden Nugget Casino line, and my personal favorite, the Rainforest Cafe.
Did you go there as a kid?
I go there as an adult, Tilman. When you look at that, though, obviously you got the pulse on every restaurant customer coming through all these brands. What are you seeing right now? Because we keep hearing about recession fears, but the U.S. consumer is still holding up. Are you seeing that in your restaurants?
Let's say this: the consumer is holding up. But at the same time, you know, coming out of 09 and 10, it was like this for 7, 8 years. The last 2 or 3 years were definitely, coming down. I mean, you don't have the growth that you had.
Yeah.
But it's kind of, but that's what happens. Usually, we have a 5-year cycle and a dip because history repeats itself, and we're on a long up cycle right now. And the longest ever. And so the consumer is not out there throwing money around anymore. And I think retail shows that, we show it, but we've also overbuilt everything. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we do need to go on a diet. We do need a little correction. We need to stop opening up restaurant seats, hotel rooms, apartments, office buildings. We need to stop building to let the population catch up. And that's what our problem is now. And that is what is going to be the catalyst for the next correction, is that we have overbuilt everything.
And Tilman, that brings us to your book, because in this book, you Shut Up and Listen, great title by the way, you talk about watch out for the paddle coming for your, I'll say, behind. And so that brings me to my next point, because you talk about when things are good, as you're just referencing, people think, oh, it will last forever, and they forget when it was bad. But you talk about lessons that you learned in your career when things were good, preparing for when it's bad. So I'm just curious, what do you tell folks, like when it comes to preparing for those situations?
Well, history repeats itself, and I've survived every one of the recessions. One time I got lucky in the 80s and everybody doesn't understand, how did these banks get so big? Because the federal government went in and said, all right, you're taking over this bank, you're taking over this, we'll take these bad assets out, you take all the good assets and a little risk. And that's why you have these monstrous banks, and most of that came out of the 80s. Mm-hmm. That's all JP Morgan Chase, it was Big Chase, Texas Commerce, and on and on and on. In the late 80s, this is the God's honest truth. I was blowing and going. I was in my 20s. I was building stuff. And I had loans at like 9 different banks, $2 million, which is a developer, that's not a big number. But for me, back in the 80s, that's a bunch of money. This is the truth. All 9 banks that I did business with failed. before I did.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you got a reprieve from the government that you didn't have to, I didn't hear from them for 4 years until 1991. And they said, Mr. Fertitta, we see you have these loans. There was nobody to pay. You couldn't have made a payment. It was in such disarray. You would have thought we were a third world country in the late 80s. And,
Jeez.
And so
it worked out
So
for you.
how lucky was I? The banks failed before I did.
One thing that's interesting to me, Tilman, is that you have a pretty young mindset as a business person, and you also write, you don't fear anything, but you worry about everything. So using that young mindset, what's the one thing that worries you about our generation, the millennial generation?
Honestly, this is the truth, and I've been friends with all your last 4 or 5 presidents, and whoever was president, Democrat or Republican, never bothered me because they all believed in capitalism and capitalists, and that is why our country is so great and everybody wants to come here. Let's be honest. Socialism scares the hell out of me, because you will shut people down like myself, who every day is building something, creating jobs, employing people. I am the great American dream. Anybody can do it if I can do it, because believe me, I am not the smartest guy in the room. I just worked hard, and socialism really scares me.
Why do you think there is that, rise of tendencies, with the Democratic Party going increasingly left? I mean, is there something that's, aside from the financial crisis, anything else that's, really doing this?
It's really interesting because it's almost like, though, the millennials are kind of leaning that way, and maybe it's because of the...
Not all millennials.
Yeah,
no. Some millennials.
No. But generally speaking, it is kind of interesting that the work ethic is a little different, and it's your fault that I went to college and I have all these student loans. It's not my fault that was the way for me to go to college. So it's weird how you get out there and listen, but it is a little scary.
Yeah.
In the book, I find this so fun. You have Tilmanisms, things like hospitality matters, you better know your numbers, the 95-5 rule, see opportunity, seize opportunity, live your leadership, and don't choose to quit, and keep punching. But there's one thing, Tilman, that you didn't mention in the book as an explicit Tilmanism, and that's your relationships. And that was really important in your career. So how do you advise people to build relationships, not just transactions, but build relationships that help you become wealthier and more successful?
Okay, that is, I can tell you this, okay, and I am part of who I am is because of relationships, and relationships in the investment banking world. And you mentioned somebody a few minutes ago that's friends with both of us. They were always there for me. Now, I always performed, and if you perform, people want to be there for you. I had other great relationships in the M&A world that worked with me when I was looking at deals because they knew I was credible. But having great relationships in the investment banking world that you developed, and I told one of them once, I said, you got to make your friends, and you got to know who to trust and who have faith in. But absolutely, I would not be where I am today without relationships, because we knew we could always count on each other.
I want to ask you this too, though, because you got all we listed off, rattled off. That's not even. That's a piece of your brands, right? That's a piece of the restaurants that you have. Just a little tiny piece.
Yeah.
When it comes to all of those, though, the one constant thread is pleasing the customer. You make that a big piece of your book. Is hospitality, is making sure that you never say no to the customer. You got to be reasonable, but never say no. Curious, out of all those cuisines and what you eat, what pleases Tilman Fertitta? What's your favorite go-to? Your hospitality meal that makes you feel good?
I don't have a favorite, because if you could be in shorts on a Sunday afternoon and you can go to a Bubba Gump or go to a Mastro's, or tonight I'm going to my new Catch Steak here in New York City. It's whatever the mood is or the time, but it's great. I love catering to every demographic, and from money to whatever. I mean, is that you touch everybody from kids to the chic, and that's what I love.
Let's talk about your key demographic too, though, because you're the owner of the Houston Rockets. There, obviously, you
same thing. Though. It's no spare customers. It's the same rules.
Well, what's slated for this year to really please all the Houston Rockets fans out there?
Well, I went out and got Russell Westbrook, so I have 2 out of the last 3 MVPs. I've got 2 $40 million players, which I'm proud of, believe it or not. But it's really no different, because remember, if you don't put a good product out on the floor, then the people aren't going to come in your seats. And it's no different in being in a restaurant or a hotel or a casino, that you're not going to get that customer if you don't give them a good product.
Yeah.
Because once again, in a city like Houston, you have so much of the entertainment dollar, from the museums to the shows to other sports teams. So you've got to, you've always got to put the best you can do, and that's what I try to do no matter what my business is.
Common thread among basketball, restaurants, hospitality, any business, and it's all
It really
on you.
is.
Shut up
It
and
really
listen.
is.
Tilman Fertitta, thank you so much for bringing it down.
Thank you,
Appreciate you taking
guys.
the time.